Brothers, our world is shaking in a way we cannot afford to ignore. Each day, as breaking news pours in, we see fragments of the apocalyptic picture emerging. Conflicts are no longer distant. They're erupting at multiple flashpoints. Borders have become fragile fault lines, and peace, once thought by many generations to be secure, is vanishing like morning mist under the sun. The question is not, will there be war? For Jesus himself warned that humanity would hear of wars and rumors of wars. The real question is, are we living at the very moment the prophecy foretold? Look around. From Ukraine and Gaza to the Red Sea and the Taiwan Strait, sparks of conflict ignite one after another. Political experts call this a new Cold War, yet many believe it's merely the prelude to a far hotter and more devastating storm. Nearly 2,000 years ago, on the island of Patmos, the Apostle John received a revelation that still chills the reader today. He described with uncanny precision what many see in our modern world: great empires locked in a silent arms race, pouring trillions into military technology, sharpening strategies as though they sense an enormous event approaching. Russia, China, the United States, and Europe all seem to be playing a deadly chess game, with the final move still hidden. When we read Revelation chapter 6, it's hard to ignore the haunting parallels to our age. Could it be that the second seal is about to be opened, or perhaps it already has, and we have yet to realize it? Non-aggression pacts are being broken. Alliances dissolve and reform under new calculations. The global balance of power trembles like a skyscraper in an earthquake. And at the center of it all stands the rider of the red horse, described in Scripture as one with the authority to sow chaos. In Revelation 6 verses 3-4, the words still echo like a solemn warning. When the Lamb opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, "Come and see." And behold, another horse, fiery red, went out. Its rider was granted power to take peace from the earth, and that people should kill one another, and to him was given a great sword. We are living in a time where history, politics, and prophecy converge into a tense, unfolding symphony. The challenge is not merely to watch, but to prepare, spiritually in faith and in awareness, so we are not swept away when the real storm arrives. This horseman is not just a vague symbol. His image carries a clear and terrifying meaning, an era of global-scale war, when humanity plunges into a whirlpool of violence, brothers turning against each other, and nations facing one another like ancient enemies. The blazing red of the horse is no accident. In Scripture, red represents bloodshed, destruction, and chaos. When John witnessed his vision, he understood that a day would come when peace would be ripped from the earth, like a blanket suddenly torn away on a freezing night. The great sword given to the rider was not merely a weapon, but a symbol of limitless destructive power. This is no longer about small border disputes or local skirmishes. It is a warning of wars that would reshape the entire world and touch every human life. Most chilling is the phrase, to make people kill one another. This implies that the conflict will not be confined to trained armies, but will drag civilians into its grip, tearing families apart, breaking communities, and setting entire societies against themselves. For centuries, biblical scholars have debated the exact timing of these events. Some believe they have already been fulfilled in past wars, while others hold that they still lie ahead. Yet when we look at today's global scene, it is difficult to ignore the mounting signs. The rider of the red horse does not ride alone. He is part of the legendary sequence of 4 horsemen, the white horse of conquest, the black horse of famine, and the pale horse of death. Together, they work to set the stage for the final act of prophecy. The question is not whether he will come, but whether he has already arrived, riding through nations and preparing the ground for the prophecy's full fulfillment. Imagine, for a moment, a world stripped of peace, not just a temporary absence of calm, but a total uprooting of that sense of safety that lets families sleep soundly, children play in the streets, and nations trade without fear. The Bible speaks clearly of peace being taken from the earth, and the original Greek describes it as something violently pulled out by the roots. For the past 7 decades, humanity has enjoyed a period of relative peace. Yes, there have been regional conflicts, but never a world war that engaged all major powers at once. How much longer can that last? This fragile peace was once the foundation for great leaps forward. It was the invaluable calm that allowed technology to boom, global commerce to flourish, and civilizations to rise in splendor. Yet now, a profound shift is taking place. Seasoned geopolitical analysts are sounding the alarm, suggesting we are entering an era of great power competition, a terrifying scenario reminiscent of the period preceding the two world wars of the 20th century. Old alliances are being reinforced, new lines are being drawn on the world's political map, and the atmosphere of tension is growing thicker by the day. This is not just war between nations, but a smoldering wave of violence that is spreading deep into every corner of society. We are witnessing clear signs of this chaos. Civil conflicts, extreme political polarization, urban violence, and ethnic clashes that once seemed like things of the past are resurging with renewed force. When we look at the current world map, what we see are not isolated conflicts, but a complex and interwoven network of tensions. Each hotspot is a link in a gigantic chain of dominoes that could collapse at any moment. In Eastern Europe, the war between Russia and Ukraine has resurrected ghosts we thought were buried since World War II, with hundreds of thousands of lives lost and the risk of expansion to NATO countries. In the Middle East, the situation between Israel and its Arab neighbors has escalated to an unprecedented degree, as horrific attacks and brutal retaliations have pushed the region into a spiraling vortex with no apparent exit. In Asia, China makes no secret of its ambition to unify Taiwan at all costs, with military drills taking place monthly as a constant threat. At the same time, North Korea continues to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles and has declared its readiness for an all-out war. Africa is no more peaceful, with conflicts in Sudan, Ethiopia, and the Sahel, where terrorist groups control territory and force millions into displacement. In Latin America, border tensions, internal conflicts, and political instability in many nations paint a worrying picture. The most terrifying aspect of this era is that these conflicts seem to have no viable diplomatic solutions. The positions of all parties have hardened, mutual trust has eroded, and instead of mediating, global powers are choosing sides. A time when peace completely disappears from the earth may be approaching, and the warnings in ancient texts about a time of trouble like never before in human history seem to be coming true. Global military escalation. The cold numbers tell a troubling story. When we look at the statistics of national military expenditures, it becomes clear that the world is quietly preparing for something massive. In 2023, global military spending shattered records, reaching $2.4 trillion. The United States still leads the race, with an annual defense budget exceeding $800 billion. But this is no solitary competition. China increased its spending by 7.2%, while Russia, despite economic sanctions, raised its budget by 24%. Europe, once convinced that lasting peace was inevitable, is now urgently rearming. Germany has announced a special €100 billion fund to modernize its forces. Poland has become the NATO member dedicating the highest percentage of its GDP to defense. The arms industry is working at unprecedented intensity. Factories producing ammunition, tanks, fighter jets, and air defense systems operate around the clock. Demand is so high that delivery times for military hardware now stretch to years. What alarms experts most is not only the scale of spending but the type of weaponry being developed. Autonomous artificial intelligence systems, hypersonic weapons traveling more than 5 times the speed of sound, and nuclear arsenals undergoing constant modernization. Russia boasts of its Sarmat missiles, capable of obliterating an area the size of France. China is building anti-satellite weapons that could cripple the military communications of its adversaries. The United States is investing trillions in laser weaponry and space defense systems. The arms race has now expanded beyond Earth, as major powers develop both offensive and defensive space capabilities, fully aware that future wars will be fought across multiple domains at once. The prophet Joel once spoke of a time when nations would say, "Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears." Joel 3 verse 10. This stands in complete contrast to Isaiah's vision of the millennial kingdom, when swords will be turned into plowshares. Today, modern warfare has advanced to a level that makes the language of the biblical prophets easier to understand. When John wrote of beasts that breathed fire and smoke, when Ezekiel described wheels full of eyes, or when Zechariah spoke of chariots running between bronze mountains, They may have been glimpsing the technologies of future warfare, visions that we are now beginning to see with our own eyes. The world we live in is not just an era of groundbreaking technology, but also a stage where ancient prophecies are being interpreted to the most modern of languages. Artificial intelligence, AI, has completely redefined the battlefield. We now have autonomous drone swarms that, without human intervention, can identify, pursue, and eliminate targets in the blink of an eye. They are not merely machines but entities that learn and adapt, making decisions in microseconds. This is nothing short of a prophecy coming to life, foretelling a time when machines would have life to act. And it's not just a battlefield. Global surveillance is creeping into every corner of life. Sophisticated satellites, facial recognition camera systems, and real-time tracking algorithms allow for the monitoring of every human activity. Are we living in a time when no one can buy or sell or operate without a certain mark, where every action is watched and archived? This technology is no longer science fiction, but a very present reality. Hypersonic weapons are another testament to the intersection of science and prophecy. These weapons travel at incredible speeds, capable of striking any point on the planet in less than 30 minutes. When the Bible speaks of destruction happening in the twinkling of an eye, we now understand that this is technically possible. Cyber warfare adds a completely new dimension to conflicts. A digital attack can paralyze a country's entire infrastructure, from hospitals and power plants to water systems and communication networks, causing devastation as terrifying as a conventional war. Is this not a form of modern plague, a digital pandemic described in prophetic texts? Modern missile defense systems are also a marvel of science. Systems like Israel's Iron Dome, Russia's S-400, and America's Patriot can intercept flying objects with astounding precision. These technologies have turned what once seemed supernatural in prophecies into reality, showing that human progress has reached a historical threshold. However, the dark side of this progress is biological and chemical weapons. The prophecy in Zechariah 14, verse 12 describes a horrific plague where their flesh shall consume away while they stand on their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. Terrifyingly, the effects of certain chemical weapons replicate these exact symptoms. The world is dividing in a worrying way, reminiscent of the days before the great wars of the last century. Military alliances are being strengthened, lines are being drawn, and every nation must choose a side. On one hand, we have NATO, led by the United States, an alliance that has expanded eastward to include countries once part of the Soviet bloc and now incorporates historically neutral nations like Finland and Sweden. On the other hand, a new axis is emerging, comprised of China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. Although not a formal military alliance, they coordinate strategies, share technology, and support each other in international crises. Biblical prophecies also speak specifically of these global divisions. Daniel 2 describes a statue with feet of iron and clay, representing a divided kingdom that cannot hold together. Ezekiel 38 speaks of Gog and Magog, a confederation of northern nations, including Russia, Iran, Turkey, and others that will unite to attack Israel. This alliance already exists in an embryonic form, with these nations' ties growing stronger. The polarization is not limited to the military sphere, but extends to economics as well. China is promoting a digital currency as an alternative to the dollar. Russia is developing payment systems independent of SWIFT. Iran is seeking to break its economic isolation by allying with Eastern powers. The world stands at a historical crossroads, where wars are fought not just with force, but with technology, economics, and even faith. The weakening of international organizations and the rise of regional alliances. While the United Nations grows increasingly powerless due to mutual vetoes among major powers, the World Trade Organization is gradually losing its influence as trade wars erupt. Many multilateral treaties have disintegrated or lost their binding force. This picture shows a world being split into clearly opposing blocs, just as Jesus warned. Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined. Matthew 12, verse 25. The global war economy in motion. When a nation prepares for war, its economic machinery shifts entirely. Today, the global economy is gradually turning towards serving military production, preparing for prolonged conflicts. The surge of global inflation since 2021 was not caused solely by the pandemic or supply chain disruptions, but also by an enormous wave of military spending and fierce competition to secure strategic resources. Supply chains have been militarized. Every country seeks control over critical materials for the defense industry, rare earths for electronic components, lithium for batteries, and semiconductors for weapon systems. China holds up to 80% of global rare earth production, turning it into a strategic economic weapon. Energy has also become leverage. Russia uses natural gas to pressure Europe. The United States controls advanced oil extraction technology, and many nations are racing to achieve energy independence for national security. Gold, the last shield. When war draws near, central banks return to hoarding gold as a more reliable store of value than digital currencies. In 2023, central bank gold purchases reached a record high. Meanwhile, public debt in developed nations is surging. U.S. debt surpassed $33 trillion. Europe faces budgetary pressures, and China conceals its real figures. This echoes the prophecy of James 5, verse 3, about wealth being hoarded for the last days. Economy and war merging into one. Economic sanctions have become weapons. Russia faces more than 12,000 sanctions. Iran has been cut off from the global financial system, and China fears being severed from Western technology. Strategic metals like palladium, cobalt, and germanium have become geopolitical cards. Whoever controls them holds the key to advanced military technology production and information flow control. Information warfare, the invisible front line. One of the most alarming signs of our age is how media and social networks are used to mentally condition populations for war. Each side builds its own narrative and declares it to be the sole truth. Russian and Western media portray the Ukraine war in completely opposite ways. Chinese media depicts the U.S. as the aggressor, while U.S. outlets paint China as the threat. Social media algorithms create echo chambers where individuals only receive content reinforcing their pre-existing beliefs, dividing societies within, just as prophecy foretold about the end times, when even families will be split apart. Fake news, automated bots, and deep fakes make distinguishing truth from falsehood nearly impossible, fulfilling Isaiah 5:20's warning about those who call evil good and good evil. When governments control information for national security, social networks lock accounts, press outlets lose their licenses, and journalists face danger, the battle is no longer fought only on land, sea, and in space, but also within the human mind. When freedom becomes a casualty of war, in times of rising conflict, the first thing to be surrendered is often the right to speak freely. Modern propaganda is no longer just loud slogans. It uses refined psychological strategies to shape thought. Opponents are not merely criticized. They are painted as monsters. Sacrifice of the military is exalted as the highest honor. War is framed not only as unavoidable, but as righteous. Little by little, societies are conditioned to see armed conflict as the only path forward. Even the church is not immune. Congregations splinter along political borders. Russian believers rally behind Putin. Ukrainian believers condemn him. And in the United States, Christians are split between aggressive calls for intervention and passionate pleas for peace. The unity of Christ's body weakens under the weight of national allegiance. Jesus forewarned that in the last days, many false prophets would mislead multitudes. Matthew 24, verse 11. These prophets are not always preachers. They can be any leader skilled in bending public opinion through false hopes and cleverly crafted lies. The Apostle Paul foresaw such days, an age where people will be self-absorbed, greedy, arrogant, irreverent, ungrateful, and hostile to what is holy. 2 Timothy 3 verses 1-2. This is not a distant vision. It is the climate we live in now, facing the storm without fear. If all these signs are real, what is a believer's response? Not panic, but preparation, both spiritual and practical. None of this surprises God. Before the foundations of the earth, He knew every chapter of human history. Through His prophets, He told us what would come. Jesus Himself assured, I have told you these things, so that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take courage. I have overcome the world. John 16, verse 33. Prophecy was not meant to terrify us, but to anchor our trust in God's absolute sovereignty. When events unfold exactly as foretold, It should deepen our confidence that He remains in control. Steps for the faithful in turbulent times. Strengthen your spiritual core. Build an unshakable connection with God through prayer, scripture study, and fellowship with other believers. When the foundations of the world shake, faith will be your true shelter. Prepare wisely. Stocking basic food, water, and medicine is not unbelief. It is foresight. Joseph prepared Egypt for famine, and Jesus taught us to pray for daily bread. Protect unity. Let not political flags divide the cross of Christ. Our ultimate citizenship is in heaven. Shine brighter in the darkness. While hatred multiplies, show forgiveness, compassion, and hope. Share the gospel urgently, knowing that time is slipping away. Pray for peace and leaders, as instructed in 1 Timothy 2, verses 1-2. Intercede for all who hold authority, so that we may live in peace and godliness. Looking beyond the horizon, even as a red horse of war gallops and nations tremble at the rumors of coming battles, we cling to a promise that cannot be broken. Christ will return as King of Kings to reign with justice and peace. Revelation closes with His words, "Behold, I am coming soon, and my reward is with me, to give to each one according to what is done." Revelation 22, verse 12. This is not blind optimism. It is our immovable hope in the midst of the storm.